Hello again. I hope the microphone's working. Having had a vague idea, pretty good idea what Van was going to speak about, how did that apply to our occupation as marine surveyors? What do we need to know about non-skid? Dave Weister and I were recently on a headboat, 99 passenger headboat, and we weren't asked the question, what's the quality of the non-skid? But we could have been asked the question. And what would we have known about it? I wouldn't have known anything about it. Now we know more about it than I need to know, and it is an incredibly boring story. But it's nonetheless a standard by which we are going to have to live. Someone is going to ask us, what was the non-skid quality of that deck when you inspected it before Mr. Jones slipped on the fish head and broke his back? And we won't have an answer to that. And it won't be in our report that we didn't measure it or weren't asked to measure it, because there's a standard for measuring it. And the standard of measurement comes from, of all places, National Institute of Marine Flooring Safety. There is such a place. And we have the capacity to measure it. The tools that we use, which I'm going to show you very briefly, are somewhat limited. And they're mostly antiquated. But there's a new tool in the marketplace, just like that new thermal camera, that new moisture meter, that new whatever that you had, or the new tool that you put on the side of the outboard motor that tells you what the codes are inside the cowl. That's a tool we don't have, but it's there to be used. And these tools are here, and there's profit in it. I keep going back to that, but that's why we're here. So measuring the coefficient of friction, that's the standard. And that standard is set by the manufacturer of the product with approval of OSHA, American Disabilities Act, ASTM, ANSI, etc. And they're all based on what the drag coefficient from static to kinetic is. In other words, what will you need to do to not slip in a certain situation, wet or dry? I won't go into how many thousands, tens of thousands of slip and fall injuries there are a year. And we know where we live, and it can sue anybody for anything. But the surface of this deck in this building has been measured for what the slip characteristic is. And as Van points out, you get huge granules in some of your coatings, and there are coatings that actually have, that are porous. They're likely to be sucked down by vacuum. But that's less important than, do you think the guys on this deck are worried about slipping? You can be sure they are. And they're dependent upon their shoe wear. But the nurse in the hallway of General Hospital doesn't have that advantage. She's not wearing cleats. She's wearing soft-soled shoes and can slip on anything. How do we measure that? Why do we measure it? How can we, as surveyors, provide this service? OSHA, ANSI, ADA, National Flooring Safety Institute. We have standards called English Excel, it has nothing to do with the UK, invented in the US. ASTM, a series of individual measurement systems that a standard is used. Some standards do not apply to wet surfaces. Some standards apply, believe it or not, to vertical surfaces. What do you need for a non-skid vertical surface? If you're a fireman and you need to climb a mast of a fire truck, you need to know what the vertical adhesion rate is climbing up that pole. Will that be applicable to our business? Perhaps. Will the NACE 513, 9333, Standard National Association of Coating Experts, be applicable to what we do? Well, at least we should mention that we don't know anything about it, but it's there to be measured. There is nothing more boring than reading about non-skid surfaces. Sorry, man, but it's not an exciting subject. The Navy, or the military, has a standard, as you do on your ships. This the Surface Forces Logistics Center standard 6310. I didn't know that existed. Nobody in this room knew that existed. Now you have something to look up. Another great subject. If you find yourself with insomnia, pick it up. So how do we measure the skid resistance? And you measure the first older tool would be this.
Nothing's showing up on the screen.
Oh, good. Okay. Well then.
Whoa.
What you see here, do we see there? No, we don't. Uh-oh. All right. Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to improvise with saying that the first tool that you've used is something called a pendulum meter, and it basically swings an arc across the surface and measures the resistance of this pad going across a surface, whatever it might be. That would have been one thing. And there are, I think, James machines. There's something called a Brubaker machine, which you take a coupon sample, take it into the laboratory, impractical for deck surfaces, doorways, whatever. Boy, another one is a Tortoise machine, which is about $7,000. It weighs about 30 pounds. It's heavy, 30 pounds to drag around. It reads it, it prints the result of what your coefficient of friction is, and the manufacturer or the surface or the building or the insurance company is going to say, we need to have a slip resistance of a number, 0.103, whatever it happens to be. You'll know what that number is, and you can measure it with a Tortoise machine. I don't know why you would have to have something this heavy, but that's what it does. It weighs the same every time. So you know what the slip resistance is when you're moving it. It measures that. But in the real world, the world of surveyors, there's something called a slip alert unit. And for all the world, this appears to be an enlarged MacBook corporation that your grandchildren have. It's light. It falls off an inclined plane. So you set up a ramp. It's the same ramp every time. You put the MacBook car on it, but size of a shoebox. You let it roll down the ramp. When it hits the bottom of the ramp, the rear wheels pop up, and it measures the drag resistance. You do that 3 times. You can do that 3 times in a minute, as opposed to the Tortoise machine and the pendulum may take a half hour to set up. So you can do several sections of the deck in 15 minutes and be able to report that at least today, in dry conditions, this is what the situation is. Then you wet the surface with a prepared solution and you remeasure it. And this is what the slip resistance is in wet condition. Put it in your report or not, but certainly have that as part of your program. I think when we're doing any vessel that's under charter, we should at least know that the system exists to where we can measure this and provide a service and another addition to our vast array of things we do for inspections. So how will this help? You can tell your client or express to your client, whether it's the head boat captain, the charter boat, the icebreaker skipper, we've measured your slip resistance in these decks, and here it is. You need to do something about it. If you do something about it, you might be able to call a man, and he can provide a service or resurface that deck if it needs to be done. Likely it does. Let's avoid another liability. We've got plenty of them. At least have this in our repertoire that says, Mr. Jones, we did or we didn't or we offered to inspect your deck, your non-skid surfaces. All of us have stepped on the deck of a wet boat and slipped, I think. All of us have seen non-skid was simply worn out. All of us have been on a ferry boat somewhere where the non-skid in front of the doorways was worn down the bare seatbelts, right? Now we know there's a standard, several standards that express that we need to know that that no longer meets even the minimum standards for what it might be, ASTM, ADA, whatever. Another service, and I always say, the libraries of learning are open to all, the halls of wisdom, however, are not overfilled. So now we know something more to provide a better service as surveyors. And I think, yes, sir.
Randy, did you come across any recreational load standards for non-skid?
I did not. And I tried to find recreation, any standard for shoe surface. Okay, there are standards for slip characteristics for a heel, called strut. You're strutting across the floor, you hit the heel, you hit the floor first with your heel. And there are standards to say what that ought to be or what it shouldn't be. But as far as, no, did not. And I didn't get a lot of sleep while I was doing this. It's really boring. Question?
So basically, there are no requirements like this, as far as, more state inspections, on the local business and all state, that restricts on that.
I found no requirements per se. That say 100 passengers an hour pass through this. So no requirements to speak to that. Did find requirements for insurers, underwriters, charterers have a standard that it must meet the standard for the coding. As man has a standard for how many parcels, whatever, per square meter. Yes, those standards are there, but as such, no.
So that is all on the, I guess, when it is being manufactured, I guess,
Or been used or re-inspected. As one of the Worcester and I did, that vessel was going to be re-inspected for insurance. And simply they didn't ask the question. And had they asked, we could have addressed it. But if we didn't mention it, they're not going to ask. Yes, sir.
The last instrument you described is practical for surveyors. Is that available?
Yes, it's called Slip Alert and Slip Alert. And it's just at $2,000. And I think that if someone asked us to inspect the decks of a party boat, and I'd get $2,000 return for doing the first inspection. One of Chris's boats that you inspect.
Where are they available?
Online. And just look up Slip Alert. Great information, more than you want to read. And the video that goes with Slip Alert, I may say I can't play. If you can work a slot car, you can work this tool. It records for you, it can transmit to your computer, it'll print it, and here's your data. You simply log in where you were, what it was, and the date, and the rest of it's taken care of it for you. At $2,000 is not a terribly expensive tool in our game. That work? Well, thank you.